When I started making games, I used Python. Now before you crucify me, when I started making games, I chose Python because at the time it was the only language that I knew, but I didn't really know it that well because I was still learning it and had just finished my final secondary school exams. And the thought of using up my summer to learn another language just to make games was something I didn't even consider. So I cracked on and tried to make a game using Python. I recently found that game, and the mantra that your first game is always bad is definitely true, because this thing was a mess of poor code and included a hard-coded jump and hard-coded collision states, and it seemed that I had no clue how functions were meant to be used by then. This is the only surviving piece of my early game development journey, as I did most of it during my A-levels and forgot to get all of the code off my school hard drive before I left. But from what I remembered, I created a text-based adventure game similar to Zork and a poorly made attempt at recreating the board game Battleships. I do have my final computer science project where I made a game based around two teams of AI-controlled fighters that would fight until one team was victorious, but this game was so buggy and unfinished that it was unplayable. It was made in the now defunct Blender game engine, so I can't look at the code or play it, so I have no gameplay footage, and you'll just have to take my word on how bad it was. But if you're really interested, I have this 42,000 word, 300 page document detailing every bit of development. Please don't read this, it will hurt you and you will regret it. Now, doing this project burnt me out when it came to programming and game development, and I didn't do anything until I had finished my first year of university over a year later, where I had the idea to make an isometric exploration game, and after about 6 weeks of Python-based game development, I had a basic program that let me paint isometric tiles onto the screen with a very small selection of tiles. Now, after making so little progress in quite a long time period, I was starting to doubt how useful Python was for developing larger games than the ones I had previously made. So I stopped developing the isometric game and decided to create something smaller, and I decided to do this by competing in the 2021 GMTK Game Jam. Now, if you've watched my video about this jam, you will know that during the jam I gave up on using Python for game development, and made the choice to use the Godot game engine from now on. This, however, was not the main reason why I stopped using Python, it was just the final push I needed to do so. And there were several reasons in the end that ultimately made that decision for me. The reasons were the slow development speed, the poor performance of Python, the inability for Python to handle larger games, and finally, this YouTube channel. Developing any game without a game engine takes a lot longer due to the significantly larger amount of work you will need to do that is not directly related to the development of your game. You will need to program all of the features that even a basic game engine will have out of the box, like gravity, animations, collision, UI, scenes, loading levels, unloading levels, and a lot more features. This means that probably 90% of your time developing will see no change in your game, which can make it really hard to motivate yourself to continue development. Python is also quite slow compared to other languages like C or C#, so once you start making complex things with a lot of things on screen, the performance really tanks. I've had basic platforming levels running fine. Just making them a tiny little bit bigger brought the FPS down to about 10. So unless you're going to dedicate your life to optimizing your code and making deals with the devil to get Python multi-threading working, I just stick to smaller games or switch to a different language or just use a game engine. I created this YouTube channel with the intent of making videos documenting development. And if I continued developing in Python, each video would have just been 10 minutes of me explaining that I had made no progress in the game, but that the whole thing was running ever so slightly worse. So using a game engine will allow my workflow to be much more appropriate and fit a regular upload schedule, and allow me to create more interesting videos regularly during my university studies. My next video will be the very first devlog for my indie game. If you did like this video, click the subscribe button and the bell button so you know when I release videos in the future. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.